Only because it's so many games. Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB strategy show. 14 games today. Yeah, 14 game Friday slate. That's a lot. And somehow, for like the 20th straight day, no weather whatsoever across every single game. We're looking pretty clear. So don't have to worry about that. We do have to break down, 28 teams. Probably be able to just write some of these off if we're being completely honest here. But we'll do it. I'm hanging out with Matt Belman at Fantasy Tips Matt on Twitter. I'm at Lofty_D. What's up, brother? How you feeling?
Feeling good, man. Happy to be on here doing a show with you. It's been like a week or a couple weeks. Friday nights always are fun slates. 14 games, which is wild, but sometimes it makes it go easier because there's just so much to talk about. A lot of stuff becomes irrelevant, as you mentioned. I am doing well. I wish I had one of your cheesesteaks next to me, but other than that, no complaints. How about yourself?
Yeah, they came out nice, man. It's always good when the in-laws are like, man, this is unbelievable. And you're like, all right,
Oh,
we're
yeah,
good.
dude.
That's all I need to
That
hear.
hits. That
Yeah,
hits.
yeah, because they're like they'll eat it regardless, but they're picky.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
selective on how they kind of compliment you. But no, man, we're doing well. We're doing well. We got a lot to get into. Chris Sale's on this slate. Carlos Rodon against the Rockies in Colorado. Luis Castillo in Seattle against San Francisco. There's some spots today. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we're going to get into some of these. The old Birds song is facing Seattle in San Francisco. So funny thing is, and I'm sure you noticed this out of the gate. I'm sure for those of you watching, you've noticed this as well. Happy to have you guys with us. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, atone for your sins this morning. We got football coming up. We just released our packages, subscriptions, like all different ones, no matter what style of play. Completely revamped it. Single lineup simulator for NFL. God, I can't be more excited for that. But I'm sure, as you've noticed, this is for having 14 games. Have you ever seen this many pitchers just completely unowned for a 14 game slate?
Yeah, it's one of those where even though there's so many arms, like the guys that are getting ownership are just, especially someone like Chris Sale. And then Rodon, as you mentioned, in New York, so not in Coors against this Rockies team is about as good of a matchup as you can get. I've never seen such low ownership on, not a few guys on everyone on such a big slate. It is pretty wild. And the other part about it is, not just that Sale and Rodon are getting so much love, but everyone else is low owned because no one is coming in like it's crazy. Yeah, you're right. It's just a wild slate in that regard.
Well, I think we have to start up top with Chris Sale, Carlos Rodon, those two spots, and then we can work our way down. But when you're just looking at the implied totals for these teams, number one, like Washington sitting at 3.1, depending on where you look, it's even lower in some spots. Like I'm seeing Washington, where was it? Let me find it. 2.9, some books, 2.9 implied total for Washington, which is just insane. And then like San Fran, 3.2 against San Francisco, 3.3 for Colorado, in New York against Carlos Rodon. So yeah, these are the type of spots that going to be tough to get away from. Rodon, had a rough stretch, but he has since turned things around. You look at 4 of his last 5 starts, been fantastic. Really good. The strikeout stuff is still there. The only time he struggled over the last 1+ month was against Detroit, but getting away from him against Colorado today, getting away from Chris Sale against Washington is going to be a tough ask. The thing is, though, playing both of them together isn't exactly easy. That leaves you on DraftKings with $3,600 remaining per player. So I'm not sure how much of that combination you're going to get. And Jordan, while we talk, while I toss this over to Matt, do me a favor and just go into our lineups. And when you do so on the sim, go into, the right side where you see all the players and filter by includes Sale and also includes Rodon. I want to see what that looks like, Matt.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually have Rodon as my third pitcher here. Sale is the clear number one. I mean, he is by a ton of metrics, the best pitcher in baseball this season, in great form. He's just elite, probably going to win the NL Cy Young as he should. I don't love picking on Washington like I do the White Sox or the Rockies, but Washington's not great either, and Sale is just that good. So I think he's the priority. He's expensive enough where I don't think you have to play him in all your lineups, or if you're playing even minimal lineups, you have to play him in every lineup just because there are other good pitchers and he's expensive, but he's pretty clearly the top guy. Considering the ownership, I like Castillo slightly more than Rodon. I know that from a DFS perspective, you can make the case that Rodon's been better this year, but I think Castillo is less volatile, and the ownership is just so high on Rodon that I'm willing to take a slight projection downgrade just to not eat all that ownership. Rodon is one of these guys, and you saw it in his last start against Detroit. His ceiling is really high on any start, and it almost doesn't matter who he's matched up with. If he's on his game, he can mow down anyone. If he's not, anyone can get to him. I always worry about playing Rodon when he's this high owned, but I can't argue with anyone that has him even as your top guy at that price point in this matchup. I mean, Colorado, man, just got carved by Patrick Corbin yesterday. So if you look at that and you just say, I'm playing Rodon, I got no arguments.
Minus 310 money line favorites. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah, minus 278 for Atlanta. It's funny though, because I'm looking at some of these guys and I don't think we're entirely devoid of quality options. Now, don't get me wrong. I've been off of Taijuan Walker all season long. There's no chance I go to a Taijuan Walker or a Alexander or Blackburn against the San Diego team that doesn't strike out. A lot of these guys, Cade Povich, Michael Wacha against Philly, Brian Bayo against Arizona doesn't look very good. Kyle Freeland against the Yankees. Andre Palante against Minnesota. Max Meyer against the Cubs. I'm just going up the list here of teams where I go, yeah, that doesn't.
Yeah, I like when you do this.
JP Sears is $8,300 today. That's a tough ask. Mackenzie Gore's got Atlanta. Ryan Nelson against Boston. Damn. I mean, that Eovaldi against Cleveland. There's just not a lot of strikeouts there. When you're talking cheap options, the two that stand out, whether you feel good about it or not, Hayden Birdsong against Seattle with the strikeouts in the good park, suppresses power big time. He's getting 17%. Kiner Montero against the White Sox is getting 7.4% in our projections. And then Aaron Savali against Oakland. What do you make of these guys?
So I think Birdsong is the best option just because of the matchup and the strikeout upside he's shown. I will say I'm really hesitant to go to him on a slate this size, though. They're treating him with kids' gloves to the extreme. In his last start against Oakland, they pulled him four and a third in. He pitched 4 really, really strong innings and then got into a little bit of trouble in the 5th, and they pulled him 70 some pitches, I believe. So I don't think you're going to see crazy distance from Birdsong in this start. That said, he's cheap and he's facing the Seattle lineup who strikes out a ton. They fired their manager, so maybe in the long term that changes some things, but their lineup's still the same. So I get the Birdsong play. I don't feel great about it, but I get it. Savali hasn't been really that good this year. He's coming off a good start against Cleveland his last time out, I'm pretty sure, but other than that, he's much more solid than spectacular. He's in a good strikeout matchup against Oakland. He doesn't strike out a lot of guys. This ballpark plays well for limiting power. So I think that he's fine, but I don't feel any sort of way about him. And I think the guy that I have the most interest in tournaments is Montero. I think that he's pitched a little bit over his head. His actual numbers are better than his underlyings, but you look at this matchup and his price point. I mean, he's coming off a really good start against New York. He gets this White Sox team coming back from a long West Coast trip in Chicago. He's 6,400. I think he's pretty clearly my favorite considering he's getting no ownership and Birdsong is.
I get it. The White Sox have a 3.9 run total in this game. Kiner Montero is super cheap. He's not an elite strikeout pitcher, but we've definitely seen some upside as far as Ks go in Montero. Birdsong has a 28% K rate so far. Like that's significant. And then you mentioned Savali. I think Savali's perfectly reasonable as well. I'd at least, in this park against this A's team, I'd at least rather play a righty than a lefty against the A's. But
Yeah.
it's pretty evident right now that like the A's have had some power versus lefties. They've absolutely been crazy as far as power goes. This team's also been ice cold lately as well. Like you look at their runs scored over their last like 6 or so, 2-0, 3-2-2. Yeah, it's a small sample. Things can turn around quickly, but this is still, we're going to look back on the end of the season and goes a below average lineup for sure. You're right about Birdsong. That's the thing that stands out. It's like, if this guy had no limitations, God, he would look fantastic.
Oh yeah.
But
I'd play him everywhere if that were the case.
I don't know what to make of him. 28% K rate. He hasn't been great from like a run prevention standpoint. He got blown up by Washington and by Detroit. But at that price with those strikeouts in this park, T-Mobile Park is just absolutely 100% tamps down all the possible power. And, this is a guy who has definitely given up some power this season, 1.74 home runs per 9, home run per fly ball rate of 18%. So, and for what it's worth, only 3 of the 8 have come at home. So maybe that helps him. Maybe he just gets through like 5 clean innings at that price with 8 Ks, 7 Ks, and you feel good about it.
Yeah, see, I could totally see that. I think for me, like, and you mentioned it in passing a little bit, like, other than the strikeouts, it's not like he's been that good this year. So I worry that, like, while he can certainly get Ks against the Seattle lineup, if he starts putting guys on, which he's walked too many batters and he's given up too much hard contact, like, he just doesn't have the leash on a big slate like this where he's also getting ownership. Like, I think to answer like the first question you asked at the beginning of the show, have I ever seen a slate where like no one's getting ownership except two pitchers? And I haven't, but it makes sense after going through all these guys because no one really looks good outside of Sale, Rodon, and kind of Castillo, but Castillo's too expensive for what he's been doing this year. So I get it, like why Birdsong is coming in as the 3rd highest owned pitcher. I'm just always hesitant of guys like this who are getting ownership on big slates like this. Like he's not getting ownership because he's some amazing pitcher. He's getting ownership because he's cheap and he has strikeout upside. Like there are plenty of ways where this goes wrong for him here.
Absolutely. There is one guy I want to talk about. It's going to make you sick to your stomach, but we have to do it. His first start of the season was incredible. Like if you had taken away what he did in his first start of the season, you'd have gone, my God, how could I not roster this guy? 6 scoreless, 11 Ks, 38 DraftKings points. In 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 starts since then, and being optioned to AAA, I think more than once, Bobby Miller has been terrible. But this might actually be the best matchup outside of like the White Sox. No, you know what? This is probably a better matchup than the White Sox because Tampa has the 3rd highest K rate on their active roster against righties, the 2nd lowest WRC plus, a 140 ISO right now that sits 3rd worst in baseball. Is there any path to getting to Bobby Miller today and going, you know what? This guy has sucked. However, Tampa is just as bad at the plate as he is on the mound.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I still think this Tampa lineup has upside, but right now they look a lot like Seattle, except for they're not even as good. And if you watched Joe Boyle, Joey Estes, or Osvaldo Bido pitch against them over the past 3 games, hard not to have at least some interest in Bobby Miller. This is one for me where kind of the, movable object meets the stoppable force in that I've been playing stacks against Miller since he's come back and he has not been good. He wasn't good in his last start against St. Louis, I believe. And I used some pieces there and they were really good. Tampa has just been dreadful though. So I'm with you, man. Like I think both Miller and Tampa are in play, but because of the context of the slate and there just aren't that many good pitching options, I'm with you that I could see Miller being a higher priority.
It feels so gross with how bad he's been, but I mean, Tampa's just dreadful. Uh, I laddered the Beto strikeout prop up to 8 yesterday and still profited because I had a unit on 6+ at plus 122. So I got plus money and then scaled it down half a unit, quarter unit for 7 and 8. He had 4 strikeouts through his first 2 innings. He had 5 through 3. And now I'm going, look, we are live. 51 pitches through 3, little high, but just keep it together. Then in the 5th, I mean, he just got in the, just too many pitches. Finished with 6. So we still profited, but dude, he looked good early on. And I'm thinking like, we're about to cruise to this. And then he slowed down. But my point is, essentially anyone that faces Tampa Bay right now is live for a good pitching performance. That's just the way it's been. And you kind of pointed some of them out a second ago.
Yeah, it just is what it is. After they made some trades, the bottom of this lineup is atrocious, and they got guys who will K. So I think Tampa is also in play against Miller because he's been bad. And Tampa, for as bad as they've been, they still have high upside hitters in their lineup. Brandon Lau, Josh Lowe, Caminero, who I'm still really high on. And Tampa gets a ballpark upgrade here, going from Tampa, which is not great for hitting. Obviously, they were just in Oakland, and now they're in LA. So if I were multi-entering, like playing 150, I would be over the field on both Miller and Tampa, like easily. I think that both sides have real upside here.
What do you think about JP Sears? The price point is a little bit concerning. He's just been very good in pitching deep into games.
It's the price point here that I'm with you on. It's just, you're not getting enough of a discount from the guys you really want to roster. I think you're only rostering him as like ownership because of the ownership discount. But at that rate, like I'd rather just play the Rodon's, Castillo, Sales and get different with bats. Like he's just kind of priced in no man's land for me. I don't think he's a bad pitcher, and I'll use Sears sometimes, but it's not like it's a good spot against Milwaukee. I'm not going out of my way to use pitchers against Milwaukee that I think are overpriced.
Do you feel similarly with guys like, Tanner Bybee against Texas, Nathan Eovaldi on the other side against Cleveland? Are you kind of the same mindset there?
Yeah, I feel about exactly the same as I do Bybee, Eovaldi. I think you can throw Hunter Brown in that mix because of the matchup he's in.
What about Bassett, though? I know that this guy's been all over the map, but this is when I was mentioning the worst teams against righties, including the White Sox and the Rays in the conversation. There's another team, a third team that I hadn't included that belongs there, and that's the Angels.
Bassett kind of is giving me Bobby Miller vibes here in terms of like their place on the slate. I don't think that his floor is as low or his ceiling is as high, but Bassett hasn't been very good, but he's in a matchup against an Angels team that is just awful against right-handers. My biggest problem is he's 9K basically, and like he's way too close to the Rodons, Castillos of the world in my mind. I think I'd play him over JP Sears just because of the matchup, but he's too expensive for who he's been this season. I get it. It'd just be a matchup play, and I'm not playing the 3 chalky pitchers, but again, I think I'd just rather spend up and get to Castillo, Rodon, and obviously Sale and get different with bats. The guys that I'm looking at that aren't getting ownership are like the cheaper guys. And this feels disgusting, but like Kyle Hendricks, Max Meyer, like great pitching park, bad to okay offenses. Like I don't really see it with the expensive pitchers except for your Bobby Miller call.
I think I see a path. I see a path for Bassett probably a little bit more than you do. Only because the ownership coming on Chris Sale and Carlos Rodon, don't get me wrong, like justified, but essentially 50% to Sale on a 14-game slate, 40% to Carlos Rodon on a 14-game slate. They look great. I assume that, anyone who runs the Sims, like Jordan, how much exposure do we have to Sale and Rodon? My guess is a ton still. Right? Yeah. Go to pitchers. Do we have any Chris Bassett? What's that? What does that say? What? Okay, so basically nothing. I guess the only way, the only read I have on this is that, first of all, he is positively leveraged. Not a ton, but he is. As a matter of fact, he's basically tied as the most positively leveraged pitcher on the slate. I agree the price is too steep when you're comparing him to those guys. But I also think like, okay, well, Bassett 3 games ago, 31 fantasy points against Baltimore, 29 against the Yankees earlier in the year, 26, 26, 28. He has those, he still has the ceiling. And as much as he scares me, he's, more than a K per inning guy at home this year, 23 or so % K rate on the season. None of that stacks up to Rodon. None of that stacks up to Chris Sale. I get that. But what if this matchup just lends itself to being so good that he ends up going, 7 scoreless with 7 Ks and is one of the best pitchers on the slate? That's kind of what I keep coming back to here, because the Angels now basically tied 7th highest K rate versus righties on the active roster with a bottom 3 WRC plus, bottom 3 ISO, bottom 3 WOBA. They've been really bad.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the 3-run homer they hit in the 9th yesterday, they hadn't scored in like 17 innings.
Really?
Yeah, against a couple, Michael Lorenzen and then whoever the Blue Jays were throwing out yesterday. So you sold me a bit on Bassett. Like, I think he's too pricey, but the ownership discount is real, and he still is 1,000 cheaper than like Rodon. So I could see playing some Bassett here. It's funny, you mentioned how positively leveraged he is here, and he is, but because of Sale and Rodon, and even Birdsong to agree, almost every other pitcher on the slate is positively leveraged. I've never seen something like this.
I know. Well, it makes sense when you have such heavy negative
Right.
leverage on Sale and Rodon.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see. We have Sale, Birdsong, Rodon. Yeah, so we're getting all of those guys, including some Kiter Montero. It's not shocking to me. It's really not. I just always enjoy trying to see if there's value out there that we can pull, and I'm not sure how much of that there's going to be today. Just not. Like, Chris Flexen is 5,300. It's a good matchup, but how much faith do you have in that guy? Plus, he hasn't thrown more than 78 pitches recently. I don't see it, Matt. I don't see it with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, what about Hendricks against Miami? It's the last one I'll ask you about.
What's his K rate on the year now?
Sure not.
It is 16%. So, I mean, this is, again, one of those games where you play him, you're just hoping for that efficiency.
Yeah, and the price point, because I will say, to your point earlier, like, if you play Rodon and Sale, like it looks like just the field is going to, you're not getting to expensive stacks. You can get to a couple pieces, but this is why we're showing the Red Sox and the Yankees is both like very under-owned. So it's not even just about you're hoping for the efficiency. Yeah, you're hoping for the efficiency for sure, but you're just hoping that these guys are okay and the bats are what wins it for you.
For sure. But I think also on a 14-game slate, there's so many pitchers that if you nail the right value guy that has some strikeout upside, you could be in real business here.
That's a good call, which maybe makes me like Hendricks less here, just because there are so many other guys like in that range that maybe their floors are lower, but their ceilings are higher. Good call.
Would you play David Festa?
I think if you were a little bit cheaper.
What's that?
I think if you were a little bit cheaper. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. I think I cut you off. He has some strikeout stuff, 28% K rate this season. Throughout the AAA and AA, he had, steady 30+% K rate. I wonder if that's a viable spot here. Just looking at him at 7,100. As gross as it is on pitching for a lot of these guys, it does at least feel like you could pull probably 6 or 7 guys in this sub 8K range and go, hey, they could either get blown up today or they could end up having a really nice start. The problem with Festa is there's actually a St. Louis team with a sub 20% K rate on the active roster against righties. 107 WRC plus is 12th. Not a lot of power, and that's kind of been a struggle all season for them. They're bottom 5 in that respect, but They just don't have a ton of strikeouts on this roster right now.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. I just want to say one more thing about Montero, which is why I think he's the guy I'm kind of leaning in on. And I don't feel good about it. Like he hasn't been great from a real life perspective, but not only like is he coming in a lot lower owned than Birdsong, but the White Sox are like owned here. We're projecting them to be the 5th highest owned stack on the board. It's because of their price points and they're easy to fit with Sale and Rodon. So you're getting leveraged using Montero also. Like, yeah, I think he's my guy here if I'm spending down.
Any other pitchers you want to talk about?
Not really. I will say that Bybee, I could see like throughout the course of the day having more interest in Bybee just because I think he's a very, very good pitcher, if not, quite on the level DFS wise of like the Chris Sales or probably Rodon's of the world, and Rodon's in the better spot. But Bybee's cheaper. He's at home. Texas doesn't scare me. So I think he's kind of the odd man out for me, but I wanted to shout him out.
Okay. Here's how I'd like to do this. We're going to build some lineups out, but let's first just kind of break down the actual practicality of some of these stacks. Cause I think you made a good point earlier where it's like, okay, yes, Kyle Freeland and Ryan Nelson are going up against the Yankees and Red Sox respectively. Just clearly good spots to stack for both of those teams. But from a value perspective, even the Dodgers against Tyler Alexander, we have all 3 of them in the top 4 implied total, top 4, top stack odds, all of that. How difficult is it going to be to get to them? And does it make any sense? I don't know if it does. We can run some lineups. My guess is they'd be negative simmed ROI when we do. Does it make any sense to just completely leave the reservation on this slate and try to go 2 cheap pitching options and load up on one of these really expensive stacks in a great matchup?
I think it definitely makes sense. I'm not saying that
Okay.
it's like for sure the way to go, but for me also, outside of Sale and Rodon, like it's not like you've got 8 guys up top where like a few of them are definitely going to pitch well. There's only a couple guys up top where you're like really worried about them breaking the slate. All of a sudden, if those guys don't break the slate and your cheap guys are just okay, yeah, I mean, because there are expensive bats that are in good spots here that are just really hard to roster if you play Sale and Rodon together. On the flip side, there are also cheap bats I like that aren't getting a lot of love that you can play with Rodon and Sale. So full gamut on this 14-game slate.
Jordan, before we build a lineup, go into our sims, go to lineups again, like we did with Sale and Rodon, and let me know, by the way, when we get the results. Just interrupt if we have. And I just want to see how many we have, if any, with Birdsong and Kiter Montero in the same lineup and what those stacks look like. Because if you were to build that lineup, Matt, you've got $4,600 per player remaining. That allows you to do quite a bit. And man, this Yankees team against Kyle Freeland today, it is hard to not want to at least try to see if we can get there.
Yeah, especially like Judge and Soto. I mean, I don't even think you need to like fully stack them, and Stanton maybe. But yeah, it's with Birdsong and Montero, you can easily do it. Yeah, it's a fun slate in that regard. There's tons of ways I could see this going.
And what are the ROI? What's the highest simmed ROI number? Okay, so what's the highest simmed ROI among all of our 150 favorited lineups? Yeah, take your time. Okay, so 70 is actually not that bad. Interesting. I'm trying one right now, Matt. It is Birdsong Montero with Trevino, Torres, Judge, Soto, and Stanton. Gives me 3,900 per player remaining. What would be your preferred relatively cheap 3-man stack? And on a slate like this, obviously 5-man stacks make a ton of sense. Just looking at a 14-game slate, what would be your preferred 3-man here?
I think I'm going to say Tampa. They have upside and they're affordable. They're not getting ownership.
Jordan, instead of doing that, just go to our sims real quick and go to our stack exposures. I get it, Matt. Like I mean, you're right. Bobby Miller and Tampa both make plenty of sense here.
I also like Kansas City against Taiwan Walker, but the problem with there is like the guy, you can't play like Judge, Soto, and Witt, it's like impossible.
Yeah, exactly. Let me actually try it. Let me actually try it with Detroit here. Just seeing our Sims result and how they pop out. Let me see what happens if I go with Detroit, which I don't think either of us are going to have a big issue with against Chris Flexen, right?
No, I mean, Detroit's one of the better stacks on the slate, I would think.
All right, so we'll go Torkelson at third. This could be tough. Yep, we're not doing that because we need first, third, and shortstop, and it just it doesn't work.
Actually, it might work well. How much did you say we have per?
3,900.
You go Trey Sweeney.
Like,
go Trey Sweeney at short.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
All right. So let's see.
This might be more like of a Yankees 5-2-1. Are you good with that? Or do you think strictly 5-3?
Actually, I like that because at third base, we don't really, we're not going there at third base. We could go Torkelson at first, and that gives us, actually gives us 5,500 remaining at third base.
So then you give Vlad.
You could go Vlad. Yeah. You could go Vlad. Let's see. Man, the ownership is so low on this.
Yeah, I think you're going to get that basically all over too.
48%. That's not bad because you have Stanton and Soto with low really, a lot of the Yankees have minimal ownership today.
I would imagine Judge is the one guy that gets love, and like everyone else is going to be really hard to get to.
You would be correct. Yep.
And Judge is good enough where, like, I mean, if you just want to lock in Judge, I get it,
It does seem though that so the Birds on Montero, we can get some positive results here, which is nice. What if we were to go, Matt, with one other team? So remove the Vlad and Detroit.
Yeah.
If there was another team you want a 3-man or get 2 in with a 1-off.
Yeah, let's do it. So this fits Tampa perfect, actually, with first, third, and short. They don't have a short, but if we go Caminero at third, Brandon Lau at first, and then whatever we have at short.
Okay, let's see. That gives us 3,500 for not much, just a bunch.
No.
I mean, McKinstry's probably your best bet here. I don't know if I love that. Yeah,
No, I don't either.
It doesn't set us up all that well.
Okay, so take out Brandon Lau and go Yandy Diaz.
Okay. Let's try it. Gives us a bit of cushion from a pricing perspective. 4,700 now for shortstop. That gets us to.
I'd be fine using like a Willie Adames.
Yeah, or Willie.
Or I'd also be fine going to Caballero, 3,900.
Let me try Willie Castro here.
Yeah, also him.
Against Palante, I don't mind that.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about Minnesota, but they're another one of these stacks. Like, they're fine. They just don't stand out on this slate.
36%. All right, so this is doable. Should we build one? And by the way, guys, you already know, but if you want to check out these tools, still plenty of baseball left. Football packages are live as well. Links in the description and in the chat for everything, whether it's weekly, monthly, however you intend on doing it. You want to try it out, test the waters, or just dive in, knowing that, we've had just so many insane wins lately. Jordan and I've been doing the Hall of Fame. Just every week it's another 50, 25, 100, 200, 75K. A lot of those coming from Tyler Mattis. But yeah, the tools have been absolutely dominating. And if you wanted to check out the Sims or the single lineup simulator, top stack tool, top pitchers, boom bust, top hitters, ownership, player projections, lineup generator, premium Discord, all of that stuff is down there for a week or a month. One sport, all sport. There's just a 1,000 different ways to do it, and might seem overwhelming, but that's good because then you can decide, what price point best suits your style of play. And if you ever have any questions, my DMs are always open on Twitter. You can hit me up. Or if you sign up, just ask them in Discord and you'll get a really quick response from our guys. Should we try one with Sale? I think we need to try one with Sale and see what these lineups look like.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Who do you want to go as the SP2 then?
I don't know. I was gonna say, why don't we see what Sale Rodon gives us?
Okay. Jordan, did we have, when you did that earlier, did we have anything with Sale Rodon?
You had to have, because they're both getting so much ownership. I think there's going to be a lot of lineups with both of them.
This gives us 3,700. So, all right, the first question then is pretty much, what do we not want to do? Like, do we not?
I love that question.
Do we not want to be stacking Detroit with them against Chris Flexen, given the ownership, or are you okay with it? Right. That's what I want to know. Where do we get different? Because we already have 85% ownership between two pitchers. For what it's worth, the last lineup I ran had 80% total.
So I don't know if there's a clear answer here, because I do think that offenses are low enough owned where it doesn't really matter. That said, if I were playing personally, like Sale and Rodon together, and I'm building my lineups, I'm not going to use a team like Toronto or Detroit, the two highest owned stacks on the board with the two highest owned pitchers, even though their ownership, individually isn't crazy. I think your point is well taken. And that if you're rostering Rodon and Sale, you probably want to get off the board offensively. And it's just not hard. As long as you don't roster Detroit or the White Sox here, you're pretty different. So yeah, this is where personally I'd be looking at teams like Tampa, who I've talked about. I kind of like Seattle against Birdsong. Maybe not a full 5-man, but I like pieces. Yeah, I think that there are tons of ways to get off the board here. I mentioned Kyle Hendricks and Max Meyer, but both sides of that game, I think, are in play offensively. Yeah, I guess that is a good question, though. If you roster Sale and Rodon, what are you limited to offensively? Like, who can you even stack?
So that's kind of my question, right? So Jake said, what's up, Jake? Detroit will be in everything I do tonight. I get it. Bugboy said, Sale Rodon with a 5-man, Detroit 5-man, try it. It's a 14-game slate, homie. Just get Detroit in the low-owned 3-man. I get that. The question I was asking you wasn't, is Detroit too high owned? The question is,
Right.
How high, okay,
Right.
let's say across all lineups, Detroit, aggregate ownership, or, the stack itself, 5-man, there's like 8% 5-man stacks as we have it here in the top stacks tool. What do you think the Detroit stack ownership looks like in Sale Rodon lineups?
A lot. They knew exactly where you were going with that. That's the point. You're just pigeonholing yourself into lineups that are going to be, I'm never worried about like dupes in MLB like I am for NBA, but I'm just not trying to fight with the field. Like, you were on the complete same page here. So yeah, the question isn't whether Detroit is too high owned. No team is going to be too high owned here, but how many Detroit stacks are going to be with Sale and Rodon? Or flip the question around. How many Rodon and Sale lineups are going to be with Detroit stacks?
Yeah. It's got to be a lot.
A lot. And I'm pretty confident that in like the higher dollar stuff, Detroit is going to be even more popular than we're projecting. Detroit and Toronto, we always see that the teams expected to get the most love get bumped even a little bit higher. So personally, like, yeah, I don't love the White Sox, but I would play them over Detroit or the other one we're talking about, Detroit or the Blue Jays, excuse me, just because of the ownership. I think that Detroit and Toronto are two teams that if you play with Sale and Rodon, you're going to be fighting with just too much of the field on such a big slate.
Just so uncommon to see a team that has a top 5 implied total, so a 5+ implied total, but also number 2 in our value score on the top stacks tool. When do you see that on a 14 gamer?
Toronto's also really cheap, also like as well. So that's why they're getting love. And I kind of like that because Detroit and Toronto, like I'll play Detroit when they're low owned. I played them. I had a really, really good night 2 nights ago with Cincy and Detroit. And Detroit was low, very low owned against high end. But on a 14 game slate, I know they're in a really good spot against Flexen. I'm not excited about playing a highly owned Detroit team with so many other teams in play. This is where I really like teams like Tampa. I mentioned Seattle. Like, I don't mind some Angels against Bassett. There's a ton of ways to get unique on this slate, and that's the route I'll take.
I love Kansas City against Walker, but how the hell are you going to do? How are you going to pull that off? You know,
it's so hard because then you're rostering like if, and this is like I feel like Ohtani is going to go really low owned on this slate because the question is between Witt and Judge, but then you also have Ohtani right there. It's a really, really fun slate for the big bats if you spend down on pitching.
All right, so Jordan's got it up on the screen here. This is helpful. So we have 12 out of 150 Sale Rodon lineups. And the thing that jumps off to me, I'm not surprised to see Detroit at all, which makes sense. Jordan, but how many 5-man Detroits do we have? Because it appears that most of these are not 5-man Detroits. All right, so why don't we build something out and get like a 2 or 3-man secondary Detroit stack in there, Matt, with this lineup?
Yeah, I'm about that. And Detroit has multiple cheap pieces you can use to fill out whatever we need.
Let's actually start with them. No, you know what? We don't need to do that. Let's start with a 5-man stack. You call it one that you think will fit, and we'll try it.
I'm going to go Tampa, man. I keep talking about them, so why not?
Okay. By the way, Jorge with a $10 super chat. Appreciate you, brother. As always, shout out to the team for creating more amazing tools for us. Tried yesterday for the first time, the single entry tool. Took 9th in the 250. Awesome. Looking forward to using this tool for NFL. Me too, man. Cannot wait. It's going to be so much fun. Renegade asked, I'm getting to a lot of Arizona. Are there concerns there? No, I don't see why there would be, right? Total north of 5. We have them positively leveraged. Stack score, they're 3rd for us. 3rd highest stack score. Matter of fact, we have them with the 3rd highest top stack probability. They're not super cheap, but they're not, or it's not super cheap. Yeah, but they're also not like Dodgers, Yankees price. So no, not at all. All right, Matt, let's try it. Let's go with Tampa here. They have to wake up eventually, huh?
Yeah, I mean, before they went to Oakland, they had some decent games. So again, Bobby Miller is kind of the ultimate get right spot on one side here. So yeah, I like your Bobby Miller call, but I also like the Tampa call and GPPs.
I agree. So you think it's feasible to go Yandy Diaz and Brandon Lowe?
Yeah, definitely. The problem with Tampa right now, when they have Morel in the lineup, is you can't roster all 3 together. But yeah, I think you go Diaz, Brandon Lowe, Caminero at 3rd, who's like 3,100 or something like that. And then they got a ton of cheap outfielders. So we don't know who's going to be in the lineup tonight, but Jose Siri probably is in there at like 3K. Dylan Carlson's 2,900. Josh Lowe is 4K. So he's probably the one guy you want. So maybe Yandy Diaz, Brandon Lowe, Caminero, Josh Lowe, and let's go Johnny LaDuca.
Okay.
Who's got a couple of high upside games recently. He's running.
All right. So if we do that,
Is he not? Is he? So again, Tampa changes their lineup daily. So I expect him to be in it today after not starting yesterday. He's a guy that's been playing most days.
Give me someone else for now, just because we'd have to adjust for ownership
Okay.
and stuff.
Do we have Carlson projected in?
Yes.
Okay. Put him in.
All right. That gives us a 5-man Tampa with $3,400 remaining. So what does a Detroit's 3-man look like with this? Or we might want to do 2-1, because I don't know if we want, unless you are okay with Jake Rogers.
So
You like Sweeney, so we're going Sweeney, right? You like that?
yeah, we like Sweeney.
Over McKinstry.
I think Siki's a little bit cheaper. I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. It's funny. You can do like a 3-man if you include the catcher of, if it's Rogers or Dingler, I don't know, but Sweeney, Rogers, and then Riley Green. Or McKinstry. Actually, it fits McKinstry to the T. McKinstry, Rogers, Riley Green.
Does it?
Yeah, like to the 0.
Okay. You're right. It does. It zeroes out. Let's check it out. Tampa ownership is low as well.
Yeah.
We get 38%. So we're kind of over the target here with both of these.
Yeah. Good call. He plays for Detroit.
If you get Green in, Jordan, and no, that should be popping up for you. Oh no, you did something wrong, because you have salary remaining is wrong. It's wrong. So what did you do wrong there?
All right. So he did. You shouldn't
No, so
have
McKinstry's got to be
Caminero.
short.
Yeah. So there's no Caminero and Sweeney in this one.
It's just,
I mean, there's no
Caminero-
McKinstry and Sweeney, excuse me.
Right, Caminero, McKinstry. You have Green in? Yeah, so then it's Caminero and McKinstry. Either way, we got about 38%. I say we do one more, Matt. Let's see if anybody in chat has one that they want to throw out there. And by the way, guys, if you don't mind, hit that thumbs up. Goes a long way for us here. Subscribe to the channel. What are we at? We at 50 yet? 64. Not bad. Appreciate you guys. It's not bad for 221 concurrent today. Jake said you probably don't need to go to Detroit if you're 5-man stacking Tampa. Probably not. So if you were, if we pulled these Detroit guys, we can try. This is what we can do to close it out, Matt. So let's keep the 5-man Tampa that we have, right? With
So I don't
Salem,
disagree with that, but I also like don't necessarily agree with you. I'm for this exercise, I'm totally with you, but like why couldn't, and I'm not asking this to
Right.
you, I'm asking this, like, why couldn't you play Tampa with Detroit? You know?
right. I mean, he's saying you don't need to play Detroit with Tampa, but Detroit's got a 5+ round.
Right.
You've got a top 5 total on the slate. So it's not even like you're just jamming a team that's not expected to score.
The only
why
reason I
Detroit
really
looked-
don't, yeah, the only reason I really don't want to play Detroit is because of the ownership. But when you play a team like Tampa, I mean, you're fine with the ownership, even with Sale and Rodon. So those
Right.
are the type of lineups I actually like Detroit. But I get the point. Like, if Detroit were not in a great spot here, I think that point would be more well taken, which I think we both agree on.
Absolutely agree. Could we feasibly do a decent Toronto stack? Probably not.
I think we could. Like, I think that's the reason they're getting love, is because you can.
Who do you like more, Springer or Dalton Varsho?
I think they're facing a lefty tonight, so I think has to be Springer.
All right.
No, he's a righty, so Varsho.
So that would give us 3K if I went Kirk at 5 at catcher. And then Varsho. Yeah,
I think
and
you.
Varsho in the outfield. That gives us, we don't have to go Toronto here, but that gives us 3,000.
So who are the other two? So you have Varsho and Kirk.
Uh-huh. So it's a 5-2 Tampa Toronto right now.
Okay, so who are your other Toronto guys? Sorry, I can't.
No, just Varsho and Kirk. It's a 5-2
Okay.
Tampa. Sorry, Tampa Toronto. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Really, your only answer at shortstop would be McKinstry there.
Well, you're talking Detroit now.
I know. I'm saying if we did a 5-2-1,
Oh, okay. I see.
because unless you want to go to Jimenez batting ninth, not projecting all that well. If you wanted to get that as your third for Toronto, you could. Just not sure I'm in love with that.
I probably wouldn't want to play McKinstry as a one-off if he's hitting like 7th. I'd probably just play Jimenez over him, but there's other changes you could make here. Like, I think if stacking Toronto, they've got cheap pieces. Like, they do look good as a 5-man stack with Will Wagner, 2,300. Ernie Clement is on fire at 3,600 dual eligibility. So, yeah, I think Tampa's actually going to end up higher on than Detroit even.
You mean Toronto?
Toronto, yes.
I'm going to try building a 5-man Toronto with Sale and Rodon and see what happens.
That's what I thought we were doing. That's why I was confused.
That could be Kirk, Vlad, Horwitz, Varsho. Who do you want as our fifth? Do you want to go Clement?
So I think you could stack Toronto because of their price points without Vlad, first off. I don't think that's ideal, but Wagner, Horwitz, and Clement look like 3 of the top values on the slate.
Let me throw Clement in at shortstop because that's been a troubling position.
Right.
I want to keep
He's like
Vlad
on fire right now.
Yeah. Want to keep Vlad in, go Varsho, Horwitz, Vlad, and Kirk with Clement with 3,000 remaining and see if it's feasible to make something. That gives us third base and 2 outfielders.
So I think you can definitely do this. I think if we have trouble, you can also just swap Horwitz for Wagner in this lineup. Okay.
I want to see if we don't need to.
Wagner, the son of former All-Star closer Billy Wagner.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is it doable? I just went with a 3-man Tampa here. 31. We keep coming in that range. So what unlocks it? Jordan, go to our sim real quick. I just want to see what our highest sim lineups look like. Let me cheat a little bit here. No, in general. So you can just clear everything. I can't see that well. So I want to see the pictures on the. I had a feeling. Yep. Okay. So now it's kind of coming into focus, Matt. It's like we tried too cheap, too expensive, which I think is an important exercise to do on a strategy show.
One of each.
But it looks like one of each probably is the most sensible for a slate like this.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I wonder who, right now we have Sale higher owned than Rodon. I could see that, like, I don't know. It'll probably still end up being that just because of the team total, how good Sale is. But that discount that you get for Rodon in this matchup, I mean, Patrick Corbin was like 30% owned yesterday. So I'd much rather play Sale. I think the field is probably split.
Probably is. Anything else before we get out of here?
I think that's all I got.
Me too. Hey, follow Matt at Fantasy Tips Matt. You can find me at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. Thanks for watching. And live before lock tonight for the 14 gamer. They're doing an hour, Jordan? Is it still an hour? Oh, okay, cool. So you'll be there with Eric Lindquist. Great. Appreciate it, guys. Have a great rest of the day. Peace.